Let me tell you something about Mirage. Mirage is that card that when you're watching some content creator or streamer playing a deck and they're crushing ladder, they're destroying conquest mode with this card in their deck, but you don't own it yet. So you ask them, hey streamer, what should I replace Mirage with? And their answer is literally anything. You can replace it with anything. It's not a huge deal. It's not necessarily integral to the deck's success. You see, I think you can put Mirage in just about any deck and she is going to provide a ton of value, but she doesn't create her own archetype. She's not solo carrying the deck list. Yeah, she'll have her moment. Maybe she'll even win a game or two, but for the most part, it's just giving you a little bit of extra value to get an edge over your opponent and maybe set up for what the rest of the deck wants to do. It's giving information, it's giving good stats, it's bouncing cards back to the hand, it's an honor reveal. There's a lot going for this card. So what does it do? Well, it's a 2/2. On reveal, copy the lowest cost card in your opponent's hand into your hand. Give it +2 power. Just an absolute value generator. I'm pretty hyped for this card. I think it might end up being one of the better ones in the month. But hey, Legion's looking great. I was wrong about Legion. A lot of people were wrong about Legion. He works with Storm. Who would have thought? So I guess you never know. That's why we do these previews. That's why we do the theory crafting. I try to get as much info out of the devs as possible prior to making these. But here we have Mirage, and honestly, I feel very confident saying that this is going to be a strong card. And one of the best parts about this card is it costs 3,000 tokens. It's being released directly to Series 4, and I'm always that much more excited for these cards when they're released because they feel that much more obtainable. But really quickly, I wanted to talk about Mirage versus Maria Hill because I've actually seen this a lot ever since this card has been data mined, is that this is just a better Maria Hill. Why would I ever run Maria Hill over Mirage? And I think in about 80%, maybe that's being a little bit too generous, about 80% of scenarios you would be correct in saying that. There's a lot of instances where Mirage is going to do a better job than Maria Hill, but I think there's still a position for Maria Hill. I don't think this is direct power creep, but it does feel like one of the closest ones in the last year that we've seen a release come out to a previously released card, and it's only about a difference of about 7 months, but it does kind of take its place. But funny enough, you could still play them a lot in the same decks. So I wanted to go over a few differences. One, of course, Maria Hill has 1 extra point of power. That's actually a bit of a big deal. She is a better turn 6 play because both of those cards that you're going to get to your hand, provided that the game actually ends on turn 6, you won't be able to play them. So it doesn't really matter that the card's going back unless you have Collector on the field. So you just need that power output for the cost that you're spending it. And that just kind of rounds out your curve on that turn 6. Well, Maria Hill gets you that 1 extra power. That could actually make or break a game. But in just about every scenario before that, Mirage is going to get you a card that's going to be cheap, more than likely, and it's going to have bonus power. More power than its cost would typically provide. So that's where Mirage kind of steals the show. It's like, who cares about the 1 power on Mirage? I want the card that my opponent has, because that's the cherry on top. It's the information that Mirage provides that makes it so much more valuable. We've seen White Queen do very well in a lot of competitive lists because she's saying, hey, this is your opponent's big play. This is their highest cost card in their hand. Not only do you get to see it, but you can have a copy of it. And if you want to play it versus them, then you can make that decision later down the line. Mirage is going to give you the lowest cost card, which might not seem as valuable, but I actually think it's so much more valuable because it's going to be a card that you can probably very easily play in one of the later turns, provided it's not turn 6. And then you're playing something cheap with a crazy stat buff. And if you combo that with a lot of other cards, I'm looking at the bounce package as a really good opportunity. You can get some crazy numbers on the board with Mirage. So very, very similar cards, but not exactly the same. But I do see the argument for power creep. Let me know in the comments below if you guys think this is power creep in Marvel Snap, one of the first versions of power creep that we've seen, or if you think it's okay that 2 cards like this can exist in the same space. Another thing before I move on really quickly is that the lowest cost card could still be like a 5 cost, 6 cost. We're going to get to the mechanics in a second. Whereas Maria Hill giving you a 1 or 2 cost, I actually liked her a lot better when it was always a 1 cost because there was less variance you would always kind of know it was in the one cost pool of cards. And then also it worked with Khazar, and you could do the Kazoo thing. So anyways, now that it's 1 or 2, it feels a little bit too random for my liking, believe it or not, even though it's trying to mirror Agent Coulson. Yeah, I would like to see it actually get changed, and maybe some other change to make her a little more viable, whereas Mirage, getting that information off the opponent, that's the value. All right, and speaking of mechanics, let's run through them really quick. It's not that complicated of a card, but I just wanted to go over a quick few things. If there's a tie, if they have 2 cards in their hand that are both the lowest cost, like 2 1-drops like Nebula and Sunspot or something, you know what I mean? It's going to randomly choose one of those, and you're going to get it to your hand. It's going to have +2 power. We've seen this with White Queen. If there's 2 6 costs in their hand, you're going to get one of them. That's just how these effects work in Marvel Snap. It could still copy a 6 cost if that's their lowest cost card. So let's say somehow they maybe it was MODOK came out. MODOK deleted their hand, right? And they only had APOC left in the hand, and they're going to top deck something else. But if their lowest cost card is APOC, and let's say the top deck was America Chavez, they're both 6 costs. Well, Mirage would randomly take one of those, give it +2 power, put it in your hand. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a low cost card like a 1, 2, or 3 cost. And if anything, that level of scouting is even more valuable, because if you are maybe on turn 2, you play Mirage on curve, and you take a 4 cost card from them, well, on turn 3, they are more than likely not going to be able to play a card because you took their lowest cost, which was a 4, and it's turn 3, and they don't have enough energy. Another one I've seen bounced around is Kitty Pryde. People were saying, oh, Mirage, you can steal Kitty Pryde, it's going to be an amazing play, but not really, because the player with Kitty Pryde is probably trying to play Kitty Pryde every single time. If she's on the board, you're not going to be able to copy it with Mirage. So I don't really see that being a direct counter. I don't think those two work together very well. In fact, I think it's the other way around. I think Kitty Pryde is actually a nice counter to Mirage, because that is your most valuable card, essentially, gearing up that Kitty Pryde to a high power total, and you can avoid it being copied by playing it when you're against a Mirage. And then lastly, it's not an increase to base power, it's just a power buff. I'm going to get to that in the second when we talk about counters, but that is actually quite the important note, and is going to come into play for a lot of things, a lot of like locations, certain counters and cards, so that's worth keeping in mind. So some of the pros, I've already gone over it, like the information that's so good for Conquest mode. I think this is going to be a Conquest mode beast card, but the options, getting all those options, you're getting another card into your hand. It's going to be cheap, and you get to choose whether you want to play it or not. And if you choose to play it, then it's going to have good stats, so it's going to return even more value. Now, of course, you're still paying for these cards. So let's say the cheapest thing that my opponent had in their hand was like Swarm, and it was a 2/3 at the time, it didn't even get discarded. Okay, just total random 2/3 example, right? So if I end up playing that Swarm, which is now a 2/5, I played Mirage for a 2/2. I've spent 4 energy, right, to get 7 power. That's not bad. That's really not bad. And maybe I have further synergies on top of that. But the thing is that there's still a level of investment that has to go in. And that's actually where one of my cons lies, is that it's a 2-turn investment. Because again, if I play this on 6, I can't really play that card that I generated unless there's some crazy location or additional effect that's occurring, like Dracula. Instead, I have to play Mirage, hope I get something playable for the next turn or so, and then play that at a later point in time. But here is a huge factor with Mirage. She can copy discounted cards. So She-Hulk. You ever play that deck where people are running Infinite and She-Hulk? They pass on turn 6, they have Limbo out there or something, and then on turn 7 they drop She-Hulk, Infinite, and something else, like just a lot of power in one big turn. Well, you might be able to snipe that She-Hulk if you see that deck coming. Like, you kind of foresee that they want to play something along those lines with She-Hulk, and they pass a turn. That might be their lowest cost card, and then you want to play Mirage. You'd have to predict it. It might be a little bit difficult, but I could see it being pretty nasty. Another one is Death. If your opponent gets a crazy Killmonger, or all kinds of 1-drops are killed, or Lamentus 1, or whatever else, boom, you can steal it, or, well, not steal, but you can copy it with Mirage. Or Deadpool even. They're setting up their Deadpool, getting a bunch of power. It's back in the hand. boom, you get it with Mirage. But again, you got to watch out. If they play those cards at the right time, you're not going to copy the right ones or the ones that you really wanted to copy. And lastly, Wave. Wave is pretty nuts. I actually don't think this is all that great, but essentially the idea was that you play Wave and then you play Mirage. It doesn't seem very good, but now it doesn't really matter because your entire opponent's hand is 4 costs. So you could get any card. It's basically take a card from your opponent's hand, copy it, and give it +2 power. Does not matter what the cost is. That could be really good in some instances, and there's a lot of scenarios where I feel like that would actually be worse than getting the lowest cost card. So yeah, I just think this is going to fit in a lot of decks. It's not going to be integral, so don't feel pressured to get this card. There's a lot of FOMO in this game when it comes to picking up cards. Do not feel pressured to get this one, but if you got the available tokens, 3,000 tokens is a nice place to be. I'm going to get into how I think you should approach picking up this card later. But yeah, those are some of the pros and the cons for Mirage, but let's talk about some counters. All right, so for counters, of course, Cosmo, right? Cosmo. He's going to stop the on reveal. I feel like anytime there's an on reveal card that's released, we're going to talk about Cosmo as a counter. Black Bolt is another one because if your opponent plays Black Bolt against you, you have that lowest cost thing and it got buffed with power and it gets, discarded. That's going to suck. So you got to kind of watch out for that. But there's actually Black Bolt synergy with Mirage as well, because if you play Mirage, you now know what the lowest cost card is in your opponent's hand, and maybe you want to discard that before they have an opportunity to play it. I don't know if that's going to be all that consistent, but hey, it could happen. Kitty Pryde, as mentioned, she can kind of dodge getting sniped by Mirage, so that's pretty nice. A rock, I don't know if you really want a 1/2 rock in your hand. I kind of doubt it. I think you're wanting something else, but hey, maybe you want to know if they have a rock in their hand after you played Rock Slide or Korg or something along those lines. I thought about that package working with Mirage and Darkhawk and whatnot. I don't think it's worth it because a lot of instances you might end up getting that rock, and I just rather anything else at that point. Shadow King is a huge counter though. So because I was mentioning earlier, it's not affecting the base power of the card. It's a buff. It's additive power to its base power. Shadow King can essentially remove that buff. And then Killmonger is a counter because I think in most scenarios, or at least a lot of cases when you play Mirage, you're going to get a 1-drop. And that won't happen all the time. It's maybe it's a healthy 50-50 chance of getting like a 1, 2, or 3 drop, like in that range. But like somebody who just didn't find the curve to play one of their 1-drops, they still have it chilling in their hand. Well, then there you go. You copy it. All right, and as for some key synergies and some deck lists that I've conjured up, again, I think there's so many deck lists. I'll have some bonus ones on Snap.Fan in the article, but here's some key synergies. So the Collector, right? You're getting a card back to your hand, +1 power for the Collector. Fantastic. Devil Dinosaur wants a lot of cards in the hand. This is another generator. It's doing the same thing that Maria Hill is doing, right? That's why you kind of ran that deck. The only thing about that with Dino is that you probably want to play your buffed up card. But if you don't, then it's nice knowing that that +2 power is essentially going to your Dino instead of that card that you would play. So not too shabby. Wong, if you want to play Wong and then Mirage on 5 with something else and then get 2 cards to your hand, it would be the same one unless there is a tie in their hand. Then you have a chance of getting a second one. So either bonus information or double up on a high value card. Seems pretty good to me. That's like another +4 power for is pretty well free. I think that's actually a really sneaky combo. Sarah, right? So if it's not a 1-drop that you get to your hand, you get to discount it and it has bonus power. Yeah, sign me up. That is really nice. And Quinjet. Quinjet, a sneaky little comeback for this plane, because of course, if it's not a 1-drop, the minimum of 1 text is still present on that card. So if it's a 2-drop, we'll go down to 1. Happy days. That seems pretty good. Easy to get Quinjet out there. And then we can just steal a bunch of cards with Wong Mirage play. Ooh. And that brings me to this deck list right here. The Wong Going deck list. I always liked Wong Going as a deck. It's pretty fun. It, kind of ebbs and flows in and out of the meta. Right now, it's definitely not in. And I think maybe this list could do it. Who knows? So we got Ant-Man, Quinjet, Howard the Duck. Why do we have these cards? Well, they're cheap ongoing cards. We just want to play a lot so that later on we can play Spectrum. And if we can't play Spectrum, we'll play Blue Marvel and get a bunch of buffs. But ideally, we Wong and Spectrum. But I could see a line of play going something like this. We play a lot of these cards early on. Goose, Lizard, Quinjet, Howard the Duck, Ant-Man, whatever. Okay? Then turn 4, we play Wong. Turn 5, we play Mirage at the Wong location to get 2 cards back to the hand. And then we're going to play, I don't know, like Mr. Fantastic. Great. We're looking at a pretty good spot. Now at this point in time, and it's discounted, right? I could either play Blue Marvel in one of those cards that I got, 2 of those cards and some other stuff that I have yet to be able to play, or Spectrum at the Wong location if I think it could work. So I feel like there's a pretty decent amount of potential here. Of course, Cosmo is a huge counter anytime you're trying to do Wong Spectrum shenanigans, which is why I think Blue Marvel is a nice backup in case somebody does land the Cosmo. Echo could be another card that you want to add in here, but I don't know if it's all that good. That's starting to seem like the weakest card of the month so far. Then another deck list that I got here is the Information Station. I don't know if this one's a meme. I think it is. I got Kang the Conqueror in here, but I was thinking, okay, sweet. Let's just put everything that gives us a bunch of information. So I got Howard. Okay, we got Mirage, we got Spider-Ham, we've got White Queen, Kang the Conqueror. I just know what you are going to play, and also I know what I'm going to top deck, and I can maybe combo that with Iron Lad. I think this deck would be a lot of fun. I think it could do pretty well in Conquest instead of the ladder. Just having that control over a lot of information, knowing what your opponent's trying to do, knowing when you're going to draw cards seems really good to me. Hamming them is always a good time, and then copying the things with Mirage, getting a bunch of cards, and then buffing your Dino, playing your Dino. A few substitutions could have been like Moon Girl I was thinking about adding. I kind of wanted to fit in the Watcher here somehow, but I wasn't sure. And then Agent Coulson could probably get removed for like another control card. But Coulson's kind of nice to fill out the curve in case we don't want to play a few of those other things. And then always play Kang on curve, of course, so that we can get a free draw. So that's the Information Station. And then lastly, bounce. So this is kind of a value bounce generator, right? Because I'm kind of focusing on pulling the cards back and playing them again for the Collector, Falcon, Beast, that kind of synergies, getting that Angela ramped up. We got the Kitty Pride, using Mirage just to get me another cheap card, discounting with Sarah. It seems like a pretty nice package altogether. We could have even put the plane in here. I think Quinjet is just such a nice card with Mirage to work together to just make absolute amazing use out of your opponent's cards that they could never dream of. Like I'm turning these 2 costs. Let's say it's like a Lizard, right? I'm turning your 2/5 Lizard into a 1/7 God Lizard. We're going God tier on our Lizards, okay? Unless you got 4 cards on the other side, that sucks. But hey. All right, so all in all, I am giving Mirage the snap. I think it's a good pickup. I don't think it's a necessary one though. Don't get too caught up in I don't know, spending a lot of money to get 3,000 tokens, opening up all your spotlight caches. That's one big asterisk I want to make with this big green check mark is your spotlight caches. They're so valuable. I'm still going to save mine up for September. I think that's when the best cards are, because here's the thing. You can use your tokens now. I think it's a pretty safe time to do so. The August season, while it looks really fun, it's heavily focused around discard and destroy. If you're not too keen on those archetypes, or maybe you don't want to add to your existing decks with those new cards, you can kind of pass on that month and save up for September. I think September is just such a high value month, or at least it's projected to be based on the data mines. And this card, I just really feel like it's going to make a lot of lists. But hey, you never know. I was super wrong about Legion. I will always admit when I am wrong. That's why I'm trying to do this, to hold myself accountable for these reviews. These are not even reviews. What am I talking about? These are previews, guys. I'm just working with what little information we got, so you just never know. I try to get as much info from the devs and whatnot in advance as possible, but I can only get so much. Just goes to show in Snap, until you play with the card, that's when you really know if it's valuable or not. But I'm still giving this one the stamp of approval. I think it's pretty good. And hey, if you don't have Thanos and you don't have Master Mold's really not all that great, but if you don't have Thanos and you want Mirage, might be worth opening up a Spotlight cache. Otherwise, if you got the disposable tokens, worth picking up. And otherwise, outside of those 2 options, I would say just pass on it. Don't don't worry about it too much. You're not going to be missing out on all that much. Just put in Maria Hill. You know what I'm saying? Okay. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, everybody. I will have an article on Snap.Fan, which has these deck lists plus an additional one coming out soon. So stay tuned for that. And thank you as always, and I'll catch you guys next time.